Okay, welcome to the Programming Exam Solution tutorial for the actual exam walkthrough. If you're listening to this now, you're probably doing these as a mock or a benchmark of some form, because obviously the exam's happened. This is for the 2017 paper, which was based around the Predator-Prey code, and this is AQA paper 1. This particular video, we're just going to look at section D. Question 9, question 10, question 11, question 12. The reason why these question 2, 3 and 4s are there is because that's how I use them in the mock exam that I set. So, if you've not seen the paper before, then it's pretty pointless I suppose you could use this video. I am going to show you the full questions, but ideally you've seen the paper before, ideally you've done the questions. The first question, question 9, that we're going to look at, looked at a bit of validation. We've then got a nice overriding a method, and then the last two are changing the location class and handling the landscape. Let's crack on. I suggest you pause this and read the question so you can refresh your memory. This is just the validation, and basically you had to whack in a while loop so that if the validation was outside of the landscape, then they just had to keep entering the code. That's the rough gist of it. You can read exactly the spec, and the test was basically trying to put in an incorrect one and then a correct one, and then also the incorrect one the other way, and then another incorrect one. So that was the test for it. So without further ado, let's have a look at the code. Okay, so I've navigated to the input coordinate subroutine within simulation, and we need to stick in a loop, so we need to make sure that the coordinate is greater than 0 and or less than or equal to landscape size. So while that is true, sorry, I'm absolutely lunatic. While it's less than 0 or greater than or equal to landscape size, so in other words it's below 0 because the 0th element of the landscape is actually valid, and if it's greater or equal to landscape size, because actually the landscape size is 1 greater than the maximum element in the list. Try again, Joe. Right, if that's true, then we just need to have a message that's something like, well, here I've put coordinate. Did they actually tell us what to put in the they did in the actual thing. It gives us a message. Where you're given a message, coordinate is outside the landscape, please try again, you must use that exact message. Right, we need to test it. We were told to test it 1, 3 with -1. Right, that works. 15, which is outside, which is the landscape size, and then 0, which should work. Brilliant. And now being asked to input the y coordinate, so that's worked. Job's a good one. Right, so that was question 9. It's really tempting, particularly if you've practiced this validation, to do what you think good validation is rather than doing what you're told. In the question, if it says do X, Y and Z, do exactly what it says and nothing else. Where you're given tests, do the tests exactly as you're told to do them and nothing else. Okie doke, so question 10, which in my mock is question 3. This is a classic AQA question where there's a load of information, but what you're being asked to do is fairly simple. So I would start by skimming over this stuff to start with, and then I would look at what do I actually need to do. That's the first thing I need to do. Then the next thing I need to do is this, and at this point it's like, oh okay, I might need to read the stuff ahead. It says what the default is, but then it says for a male rabbit, rather than the increase in death being 5%, we want it to be 50%. Okay, an increase of 50%. Need to be careful about that. And if it's a female rabbit, then we want it just to increase by that if they're at the age of 2. And it's an increase. Okay, so at the moment it's a static 0.05, and we're saying that for a female rabbit, age 1 or 2, age 0 and 1, sorry, it will still be static, and then it will increase by 0.05 as they get older. They're then giving you this table, which really tempts you to do some horrific load of if statementage, but that's not really the right way of doing it. Anyway, let's forget all that for a second. Bosh, how do I get rid of that? There we go. Let's forget all that for a second, and let's think about what we actually need to do. And what we actually need to do is create a new subroutine and make sure that it overrides the subroutine that was in the animal class. Even if you've got no idea what this is about, just doing that will get you marks. So let's do that first. Okay, so this is the method we are going to be overriding. It's in the animal class. I notice that it's just below the constructor, so that's where I'm going to work. Just below the constructor in rabbit. Right, let's have a little look. Where are we? I'm going to whack in a few comments, a comment block there, just so I can see what's going on. I find that really useful, especially in exams, so I can see where I've made changes. Examiners love it too, so they can see where they're marking. So I need to create a new method called create new age. Bosh. Obviously I have to have self in the parameters, and it needs to override the other one. So I'm using the super keyword, and so that basically is going to execute the calculate new age from the animal class. Now I need to implement the changes. So that's a couple of marks right there. At least, well, it's at least 1 mark, if not 2 marks. What do I actually need to do now? If it's a male rabbit, it's got to increase by 50% every time period. Okay, let's go back to the code, and so if it's a male rabbit, so if self.gender equals male, gender's male, and there's loads of ways you can do this line of code. I'm just going to times the current cause of death by 1.5, that's an increase of 50%. I could add on half, I could do the times equals, there's loads of ways of doing it. So if it's a male rabbit, every time this gets executed, the probability of death will increase by 50%. Right, so if it's not a male rabbit, it must be a female rabbit. Just the 2 genders in this code for rabbits. And if it's a female rabbit, if it's below the age of 2, it stays static, and if it's above 2 or above, it's got to increase by 0.05. So we need to put another if statement in there. So if it's greater or equal to 2, then I have to increase it by, not by a multiplier, but by just 0.05. So it's actually a mark for that, a mark for that if statement, and a mark each for getting the 2 things right. And believe it or not, that is it. So let's just test the code. Okay, the test tells us to run the code a couple of times, do the time period hiding it twice, then inspect the warren at 1.1. Okay, easy peasy. Where are we? Okay. Right, so I've run it. Default settings 2, 2, so that runs the code twice. Now inspector Warren, and 1, 1. Don't see individual rabbits. Yes, I do. Doesn't look very helpful, does it? Until we go back and look at this little grid, because we've got this death rate here, and it says that after two generations, which is what we've just done, we're expecting a death rate of 0.11. And for a male rabbit of age 2, I've got a death rate of 1.1. And for a female rabbit, I'm expecting it to be 0.1. So have a little look. Female rabbit, 0.1. And I could look through and see the ones. If I've got find a rabbit of age 1, and there should be one here. Yeah, rabbit of age 1. If it's a male rabbit, it should be 0.8. And for a female rabbit, it should be 0.05. Cool, that's what it is. Phew, it's worked. And of course, you'd screen grab that and stick it into your EAD. Okay, on to the penultimate question, question 11, which in my mock was the last question for question 4. And we have now got a slightly trickier task. Although it's not actually harder, it's just a bit more involved. You've got to read it really carefully. Basically, you've got to create something called a river. And in order to create a river, you also have to create land. So you've just got to read this uber carefully and then do exactly what you're told. Modify the location class. It's an L or an R. Okay? Then you've got to modify the constructor so that it's created with whatever terrain gets passed to it. And we're actually going to stop there because now we're on to something else. So these two bits are all to do with the location class. This is to do with other bits. So let's just get the first bit done and we're happy. Okay, so we were asked to create something in the location class called terrain. Did I actually give it a name? Okay, you could have called it whatever you like. This representation should be a character L or R. Let's not worry about that for the moment. And we're going to pass that L or R into it via the constructor. So as it happens, we're defining that within the constructor anyway. So let's whack that in there, and then I'm going to whack that into there. So I've created something called terrain. I've got something called terrain type, and I'm going to pass that in via the constructor. So when I create a new location, if I give it a T or an L or an R, that'll be passed into terrain. Okay, won't do anything to the fox or warren. Okay, so we now get to create landscape and animal in the simulation class, blah blah blah, and basically what we're going to do is use what we've just done, because we want to have these to be placed, every square to have an L, or it to be an R. Now that's actually that's fine when we're just doing landscape and animal routine. It gets really hard when we do the draw landscape. Okay, so this is what we've got. I've actually given myself a little space here. But basically, the bits where we rattle through and just create the landscape, we need to get rid of this and replace it with this. I've not got rid of it yet. So at the moment, we're just going to put in an empty landscape. I need to get rid of it, and I'll explain this code to you now. Right. So this is the added code. Why has that gone? That's better. Right. I'm just going to put in a little block there so I know what I'm going on. going on with. Brilliant. So I'll explain the 5 and 2 in a second, but we either need it to be an R or an L. We don't need to worry about the rabbit and fox because that will be created when we create a new location. They're set to none anyway, but we just really want to make sure that our terrain is an R or an L. The reason why it's 5 and 2 is because that's where the rivers need to be. So if there were no rivers, it would just be, forget the if statement, location R. Location L for land. It's just if it's X is 5 or Y is 2 that we need to be a river. When we run this, I'm going to run it now. When we run this, what we'll see is, run it with this default settings. When I now do a watch on landscape, add a watch, and it's just off the screen. It's never easy. It's just gone big. Now what I can do is I needed to do a watch on the whole thing. Add watch. Now I can see that I've got locations, and when I open up each location I can see that it's got a fox, which is none, a warren, which is none, and a terrain, which has been set to L. I'll just pick the first one because it's not 5 or 2, then that'll be L. If I go and pick one further down, and this is going to be a right pain, there, and let's go there so we can see that's obviously not worked. 5, 2, surely 2, let's try again. Oh, there we go, river. Get my X and Y's right. So I've gone to X equals, I've gone to Y equals 2, so that's a river. Bish bash bosh. So now I'm pretty confident that that has worked. It won't be shown on the simulation. If I ran this now, I wouldn't be able to see it on the grid because we haven't actually changed the draw yet, so we need to do that. Right then, so this little last task, modify the draw landscape so it looks correct. Wow. And it's quite nice. It says this is what it should look like. So it does say that it's got to look like this. So we can see here I've got a fox, I've got the landscape, and I've got a warren. It says you can do this however you want, but just stick to this. The problem is that we've now added an extra dimension to, not extra dimension, an extra width to the simulation. If I run the simulation normally, and I'll just very quickly do that. 1. We can see that there is only room for a number and the letter F. So I've actually got to add extra width to this. I'm going to dump the solution in and then explain it to you. Okie dokie, first things first, we're in Draw Landscape and we're at the bit where we're actually writing the grid. So this first bit is just writing the numbers at the top of the grid. Make sure you copy that. Just this little bit here. And we need to add in an extra little bit. Make sure I get my things right. 1, 2, there we go. And it's within the for loop, and basically all I've done is added an extra space so that I've got room now for, in the column, in inverted commas, for an R or an L. Oh, dare I run this? I've not checked that's going to work straight off, but it should do. Yeah, obviously it's now wonky because I've not done it for here, I've just done it for the numbers, but basically it's spread out the numbers. I'll be honest with you, if you got this right, you've done really well, because this is pernickety. Right then, the next bit is here. Because I now have a wider grid, rather than me drawing the little lines for a certain much, I'll just basically change that to 5 because I've increased 1 per Dewberry. Let's check that's worked. 1. Right, my dotted lines are now the right length. By the way, for each of these changes, basically a mark. Right, now we need to actually add the terrain in, and because we're just going to print the terrain on every single square, we don't need to do anything else. So we need to find where we're actually printing the terrain, and that is, there's fox, and basically if it's not a fox or a rabbit, in fact we want to do it regardless, so just a second. If it's a warren, we put it there. If it's a fox, we put it there. But I don't want it, I want it to always print, regardless of whether it's a fox or a warren. So I need to put it here. I need to make sure that it's not inside any if statement, but it is inside the for loop. Don't think it matters if I shove this in front or behind it, but I'm going to put it here and pray it works. I think I've got that right. It's in the right line. So that should just print the terrain. Let's run it to make sure. 1. Okay, so I've got rivers and rivers 2, 5, and I've got landscapes everywhere, and I've got 67 there, and I've got a fox there. So okay, that looks pretty good to me, if I'm honest. I think I'm happy with that. And let's just double check we've done everything. No, there's a 5th task, joy. So for this 5th task, I'm not allowed to put warrens or foxes in the river. Okay, so that's got to be in create new warren and create new fox. Crikey, this is a really involved task. So let's go there. I mean, this is actually simple, but you've just got to make sure you've done all the different bits. Okay, so I've gone to create new warren, and this is the bit where it actually creates it. So while not, landscape is none. In other words, if there is a warren there. So I just need to add a statement to there. Got 2 choices. I could add another if statement, but I think it'd be safer if I added a extra little bit to this. Bosh. So I'm not allowed to stick it in the river. And whilst I'm at it, if I go to Fox and find exactly the same statement there, make sure that there's Dewberry there, bum bum bum. So if there's a river there, don't do it. While not, yeah, okay. So in other words, if it's not a fox, or if there's a river, if it's not a warren, or if it is a river. Pretty sure I've got that right. Let's run it, see what happens. Okay, there's no foxes in the river. I'm not sure if there was before, but there certainly isn't now. And there's no warrens in a river either. Few. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well that was easy. We have now worked our way through it. There's a whole raft of things that you would have had to carefully copy and paste the code, and you would also had to make sure that you put the screen captures in. I hope you found that useful. You should feel free to go back and try looking at the code. If you've got any questions, just ask.